Give me that old-time religion. That old-time religion. Give me that...
Welcome to the Chapter 5 overview, Eurasian Cultural Traditions, 500 BCE to 500 CE. Chapter main idea. During the classical period, several religious and philosophical traditions were born, influencing Eurasian cultural and political systems. Relevance. The incredible thing about the classical era is that almost simultaneously, traditions began that have persisted and shaped our world into modern times. Confucianism and Taoism in China, Hinduism and Buddhism in India, Judaism and Christianity in the Middle East, and Greek rationalism in Europe. These cultural traditions have had an immense impact throughout history. It is impossible to imagine the world today without them. Setting the stage. These traditions contain a variety of answers to a number of uniquely human questions. How did life begin? Why do good and evil exist? What guidance should one use to make moral decisions? These traditions were products of many of the empires you studied in Chapter 4. Confucianism and Taoism came out of China, Hinduism and Buddhism from India, Zoroastrianism and Judaism from the Persian Empire in Mesopotamia, rationalism from Greek city-states, and Christianity from the Roman Empire. In many cases, the story of these traditions is connected to the political fates of those states. The first red heading is called China and the Search for Order. The age of warring states in China sparked interest in restoring social and political order, leading to the philosophies of legalism, Confucianism, and Taoism. First, legalism. This philosophy's most important supporter was Qin Shi Huangdi, the founder of the Qin dynasty. Legalism is based on a pessimistic view of human nature, saying that only through extremely harsh punishments can people's behavior be managed. It was the guiding principle of the Qin dynasty, but was discredited when that dynasty fell in 206 BCE. Beginning with the Han dynasty, China experienced one of history's great continuities with Confucianism and Taoism. For Confucius, legalism had it backwards. The best way to guide the moral behavior of individuals is for their supporters to provide a positive example. Legalism is sort of like saying, do as I say, not as I do. Confucianism is the opposite. For Confucius, education was a key to correct living. This became the basis for the Chinese bureaucracy and examination system used by the Han dynasty to select the best candidates for public office. Confucianism also reinforced patriarchy, using the family, with the father as the head, as a model for the ideal state. In this picture on the right, we have a son who is submitting to his parents. Confucius was also not very interested in religion, so we describe his ideas as a philosophy rather than a religion. Confucius attempted to provide a model for behavior on earth, but did not concern himself with the afterlife or the creation of the universe. Next, Taoism. This is a complement to Confucianism in that it does not concern itself with the practical world, but has a mystic angle and focuses more on nature, as shown in this landscape picture. The basic principle of Taoism is disengagement from the world. After all, its central thinker, Lao Tzu, vanished from society by riding off on a water buffalo, never to return. This idea is in many ways the opposite of Confucianism, but the two managed to coexist for centuries. Chinese culture contains a special ability to simultaneously follow opposite ideas, known as yin and yang. This philosophy breaks the world down into opposing forces, darkness and light, male and female, etc., and thus it was entirely possible for an educated Chinese elite to follow Confucianism at work and Taoism at home. One similarity Taoism has to Confucianism is that it is not a religion either. During the classical period, China produced lasting philosophies, but its major religious tradition would be imported in the coming centuries from India, which is where our textbook takes us in the next section. Cultural traditions of classical India. The Indian religious traditions, known as Hinduism, developed over a period of centuries, during which time Buddhism emerged as an alternate philosophy. First heading is about South Asian religion. Hinduism is by far the most complex of the world's religions, and unlike the others, it does not have a founder or even a clear beginning. As a religion, it evolved over a period of centuries. There are some key texts that your book reviews in this section. First, the Vedas, which existed for centuries before they were written down about 600 BCE. The core beliefs in these poems and prayers was that there were numerous gods, which required precise rituals and prayers to show one's devotion. Brahmins or priests performed these rituals, often charging a high price for this service. Brahmins, in a sense, became the gatekeepers for the faithful practitioners of the Hindu religion. In the next couple of centuries, the Upanishads were written. This collection of philosophical musings explores deeper questions and gave rise to the core beliefs of Hinduism. Here's a simple summary of these beliefs. Read the section carefully for more information about them. In Hinduism, the ultimate goal is to unite an individual soul with the world soul, which is the ultimate perfect reality. This process took many lifetimes, and the position into which people are born is a reflection of how they acted in their previous life. In this picture, we have Hindu ascetics who are nearing the end of the cycle and are expected to withdraw from society before achieving enlightenment. This cycle of rebirth was closely tied to the caste system, which was a social structure that you will learn about in Chapter 6. The Buddhist challenge. The core motivation for Buddhism is a reaction against the power of the Brahmins and the degree to which they controlled an individual's ability to be faithful to Hinduism. The founder of Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama, lived in the 5th century BCE and was a prince in northern India. He set out on a personal quest for enlightenment and achieved the ultimate insight called nirvana when he was 35. After this, his followers called him the Buddha, or Enlightened One. The beliefs of Buddhism are based on the Buddha's lessons for how to achieve enlightenment. Buddhism retains the core Hindu beliefs of the cycle of rebirth, but says that achieving enlightenment is a personal journey, not one that can or should be managed by priests. The main principle of this journey is to end suffering by controlling desire. After the Buddha died, his teachings were carried on by followers, and Buddhism became more popular in India, especially after Ashoka converted in the 3rd century BCE. There were two forms of Buddhism. The first, Theravada, emphasized that the Buddha was a man, not a god, and that the path to enlightenment was so personal that no one could help you. Later, a modified form of Buddhism, Mahayana, recognized Buddha as divine and created a structure in which enlightened people could assist the follower in their own quest. After this, Buddhism became more popular, though it never became the dominant religion of India. Hinduism is a religion of duty and devotion. In this section, your book describes ways in which Hinduism responded to the challenge of Buddhism, eventually absorbing it into the broad Hindu faith. Texts such as the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita presented a path to liberation that was more practical and depended less on rituals and priests. The Bhakti movement, which emphasized devotion to individual gods, popularized the faith and was the main vehicle for the absorption of Buddhism. During this era, Hinduism proved itself to be a dynamic religion capable of appealing to a wide spectrum of society. It remains the most popular faith in India to this day. Moving toward monotheism, the search for God in the Middle East. Zoroastrianism and Judaism were the world's first monotheistic religions, providing the foundation for Western theology. First, starting with Zoroastrianism. Zarathustra lived in the Persian Empire and altered Persian theology by focusing on a single supreme god called Ahura Mazda. The central teachings of Zoroastrianism are seen in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. A struggle between good and evil, a final savior who will come to restore the world to purity, a day of judgment, and an emphasis on free will and the individual choice of good or evil. This religion was popular in the Persian Empire. But when the armies of Alexander the Great conquered Persia and destroyed temples and persecuted this religion, it began to die out until the arrival of Islam to the area largely eliminated it. It still has followers today, but its main historical importance is the influence it has had on other religions, beginning with Judaism. The Hebrews were a group living in Mesopotamia who settled in Palestine around 1000 BCE. This group created Judaism. Its central feature was the belief in a covenant or contract between God and Jews. In return for the recognition of Yahweh as the one true God, the Jews would be the chosen people, gaining favor from Yahweh. An important characteristic of this religion was the way in which God was described compared to other religions of the time. To the Jews, Yahweh was a lofty, pure deity with whom one can have a personal relationship. The focus in Judaism is on moral behavior and faith rather than rituals. Next, classical Greece and the cultural tradition that came out of it. Classical Greece developed a philosophical tradition that emphasized science and reason over religion and had a profound influence on Western thought. The Greek way of knowing. Greek rationalism emphasizes experimentation, logic, and constant questioning, focusing on the brain rather than the heart or soul. Socrates is one of its most famous proponents. He was executed because the leaders of Athens found his ideas threatening. This picture shows his death. This section reviews other important Greek thinkers, such as the mathematician Pythagoras, the physician Hippocrates, and the historian Herodotus. There was an emphasis on education in Greek culture, often with political ramifications. For instance, Socrates was Plato's teacher, Plato was Aristotle's teacher, and Aristotle was Alexander the Great's teacher. Next, the Greek legacy. Centuries later, the Renaissance in Europe was largely about rediscovering these ideas from classical Greece. They were lost during the Middle Ages, but survived in Islamic culture, finding their way back into Western thought beginning in the 12th century, eventually influencing thinkers during the scientific revolution to apply these same methods to question those beliefs. Here's a model of from Aristotle of the universe showing the Earth at the center of the Sun. It would be overturned during the time of the scientific revolution by Copernicus. Greek culture has been the basis for Western thought for over 2,000 years, influencing our approach to knowledge and also much more, such as these examples of architecture. The next red section compares the lives of Jesus and the Buddha. The lives of Jesus and the Buddha had many similarities and differences, reflecting the characteristics of the cultures that hosted them. The lives of the founders. The textbook assumes we know the core beliefs of Christianity, so it analyzes it in the context of a comparison with Buddhism. Again, as you read, look for examples of similarities and differences to help you see how this historical analysis skill of comparison works. Here are some similarities of their lives. They both challenged the common values of their societies and called for personal transformation. Some differences included the fact that Jesus focused on the supernatural while Buddha concerned himself with life on earth, and that Jesus had a short public life of about 3 years, while the Buddha's public life was over 40 years. Establishing new religions. This section focuses more on Christianity than Buddhism, beginning with St. Paul and his efforts to establish a religion based on the teachings of Jesus. It is important to remember that Jesus lived within the Roman Empire, which based political authority on the cult of the emperor, and this made the new Christian faith a threat to the power base of the empire. It was not until Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity around 300 BCE that the religion enjoyed state support, leading to it being the official state religion by the end of the century. By contrast, Buddhism did not enjoy that level of state support. One similarity between the two religions is the influence they had outside of the location of their founding, Buddhism throughout Asia and Christianity first in Europe and then the Americas and beyond. And this last heading looks at that. It's called Creating Institutions. This map shows the spread of each religion, and as you will learn in a future chapter, these arrows tend to follow established trade routes. So you can see in the red arrows that Christianity began within the Roman Empire and spread throughout the Roman Empire initially. And in the green we have the spread of Buddhism from India throughout East Asia. As Christianity spread, it developed a hierarchical structure based on the Bishop of Rome, or Pope, as the head of the church. Your book discusses the role of women in the early church and mentions the schism between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, which will be covered in a future chapter. The history of Christianity is filled with conflicts and councils to try and resolve theological disputes. Buddhism has faced similar disputes in its history, though generally with more acceptance. This difference is based on the core teachings of each religion, and reminds us that understanding the principles of the world's major religions helps us to understand the world that they help to create. Now for the 10-second spice review. Major religions influenced social hierarchies and affected political structures, especially when state-sponsored religions. Greek rationalism focused on reason to explain natural phenomena. Religions both reflected and altered cultural values and beliefs, and were often spread to new cultures through trade relationships. And finally, the visual summary. This is broken down by geography, so we have cultural traditions in the West, the East, and the South. In the West, in Persia, we have Zoroastrianism. In Greece, we have rationalism. And from Palestine, Judaism, and then Christianity. In the East, coming from China, we have Confucianism and Taoism. I left legalism off because it didn't have the same lasting influence as the others studied in this chapter. And in South Asia, from India, we have Hinduism and Buddhism. That's your Chapter 5 overview. Happy reading!
Let us worship Zarathustra, worship just the way we used to. I'm a Zarathustra booster, and that's good enough for me. Let us worship Aphrodite.